program by showing you sort of that little snapshot of what an academic career trajectory can look like, because I've been working in science for 44 years. That's a long time. We have Dr. Siddiqui, who has not been working as long as I have, so she will be the new part of the academic career, and I'm the old part of an academic career trajectory, so it's out with the old and in with the new. So that's sort of the theme of our presentation here. And we're each going to give you a snapshot of our trajectory and travel journey that got us to the career stage we're at now. I'm going to tell you a little bit about our NIGMS training programs, because we now have 3 programs, so we're very excited about all 3 of them. And we just submitted our renewal application for the Bridges to the Doctorate grant in September, and some of us worked night and day on it for several weeks, and I think we turned around a pretty good application, so fingers crossed it'll do well. So I'm going to talk a little bit about what we have plans for the next 5 years, and then turn the platform over to Dr. Siddiqui, who will explain what her educational journey has been and why she's applying to the RPP program, Rochester Postdoc Partnership Program, which is also a joint program with the University of Rochester and RIT NTIE. When I graduated from Indiana University in 1973 with a bachelor's degree, I started working in industry. I had a double major in biology and chemistry. I went into industry. The name of the company was called Miles Laboratories back in those days. They were the makers of Alka-Seltzer. I don't know if any of you are familiar with Speedy Alka-Seltzer, the little character from the commercials, way back in when. I worked there in what was called a Quality Assurance Development Lab, developing the protocols that people had to use to test materials that went into making diagnostic kits for hepatitis, thyroid function disease, several different types of diseases. So that was my first entry into science. One of the benefits of working in that company was that they would pay my way through graduate school if I qualified for their program. So while I was working full-time, I took all my graduate coursework part-time at Notre Dame, which was next door in South Bend, Indiana, to where Miles Laboratories is located in Elkhart, Indiana. And so after I did all the coursework for a Ph.D. in microbiology, I took a 2-year leave of absence. The company paid my way through graduate school, so I made 80% of the salary I was earning at the time I started graduate school, which back then turned out to be about 5 times more than the stipend for a graduate student. So, you know, it was a pretty good deal, except I had to do all of my research, my qualifying exam, write my dissertation, and defend it in 2 years. It took me 2 years and 3 weeks to do that. So it was a lot of work and very little time off. Then I went back to work for industry for 5 more years. So how did I end up in academia? Well, the company I worked for picked me and 2 other scientists, and they sent $1.4 million. This is back in 1984. So $1.4 million was a lot of grant money. But they sent 3 scientists, that much money, to the University of Rochester to do a joint research program to try to clone the gene for human factor VIII. It's the factor that's missing in hemophiliacs. So it was to make recombinant human factor VIII to give as a therapy to stop bleeding in hemophiliacs. Interestingly, when I came to Rochester as a visiting scientist in 1984, 6 weeks after they moved the 3 of us scientists here, 2 from Indiana and 1 came from Germany to work on this project, Genentech, a big biotech company out in California, announced that they had finished cloning human factor VIII. So it's like, okay, now what do we do? They left me at the U of R for 9 months to learn some new technology that was brand new back in the day, which is really old hat now. But 3 days before I left U of R to go back to Indiana, to go back to my job in industry, the head of the hematology unit asked me what I would think about working at University of Rochester, and I said, well, you know, I really enjoyed my time here, but I can't take a cut in pay. I just bought a house. I was fixing it up. And then when I went back to Indiana, I don't know if many of you have been in Indiana, Elkhart, Indiana in particular. It's kind of a small town, you know. Coming to Rochester was like going to Paris for some people from other towns. So I thought, well, if I'm going to make a career change, now is the time to do it. So I called the guy back up. We decided I'd do it. I sold my house. I took a cut in pay. I came to Rochester. And then they told me I needed to write a grant. It's like, I never learned how to write a grant because I never planned to stay in an academic environment. Well, work, very hard. I succeeded. I managed to fund my research lab for 30+ years as a basic science researcher. Progressed to a tenured associate professor in the Department of Medicine and did research in thrombosis and hemostasis, infectious diseases of the lung and vasculature, wound healing, and cancer biology, in particular breast cancer research. I'm also the director. For 6 years, I directed the TBS Ph.D. program, Translational Biomedical Science program at the University of Rochester. And you know, now I'm on these two training programs, the Bridges to the Doctorate and the Rochester Postdoc Partnership for postdocs to do research and learn how to do teaching and develop curriculum here. So it's part of our joint programs with the U of R and RIT. So I'm transitioned from an industry person, never planning to work in academia, became an academician by, you know, the bootstrap approach because I had no experience as a graduate student because I did it while I worked full time. So it was a strange way to get become an academic professor and lead a research career. The end of my career is being a program training director, so I deal a lot with students and mentor a lot of students. But over the course of my research time, I was fairly productive. I published over 75 papers in scientific journals, and I was a different kind of cover girl. The research we did in my lab over the years was selected to be the cover article for these different journals over the years. So I was, you know, pretty proud of our research. And this little picture up here at the top, you can't really see it very well, but maybe you can see the colors. I'm holding this journal that had come out that day, and I said to my husband, I showed it to him, I said, who in their right mind would think about putting these colors together, this like greenish yellow and pink and, you know, blue? And then I looked down at my shirt that I was wearing, and it was the same color as the cover article, so I made my husband take a picture to document that. But I had a very productive research career. I enjoy working in the lab. That was what I was really good at. Writing grants and papers wasn't the easy part, that was the hard part. I've mentored many PhD students of my own and helped train them in the PhD program. So now that leads me to the end part of my career because I'm now semi-retired. I gave up directing the TBS PhD program last summer, and I now devote my efforts strictly to the Bridges to the Doctorate and the Rochester Postdoc Partnership programs. And we also added to our portfolio the RISE program, Dr. Scott Smith, and we're very happy about the strength and depth of programs we have to offer to deaf and hard of hearing scholars to build their career opportunities and get those exposure to skill development and the knowledge they need to apply to graduate school, do a postdoc, get the information they need to launch their own independent career. So we cover the training aspects of a wide variety of different training stages of a career. Bridges to the Doctorate, I think most of you are all very familiar with it. Some of the good bits that we have about this program are the mentored research experiences our scholars get, not only at RIT as part of their thesis or research assistantships that they do, but they also go to the University of Rochester to do what would be the equivalent of research rotations that first-year graduate students do when they're trying to pick a mentor and find a research project to become their dissertation research, so that they find the match between a mentor and science that works for them, so they have an idea of what they're going to do for the next 5 years of their life as a PhD student. So we offer those research rotation opportunities, up to 3 at the University of Rochester, and that's, of course, a very important part of our Bridges to the Doctorate program. They also take graduate level coursework in their major discipline of interest, but also what really helps is the professional development skills offered, and Dr. Jess is very good at arranging that and identifying what we need our scholars to learn and the soft skills to work in an academic environment. So that has also been a big plus, and over the course of the first 5 years of our program, we've added more to that, and I think it's really helped our scholars. Of course, they go to national meetings and they can attend and present. We send designated interpreters with them. It's a pretty good gig when you get to go to a meeting, and it can be a lot of fun. And I've gotten to go with some of our scholars to various meetings and had a great time with them. We know how to, enjoy ourselves. We work hard, but we have a good time. So what are we going to do in the next 5 years? Well, we're going to keep all the good stuff, the professional development skills, the research experiences at the U of R and RIT, paid assistantships, but we're also going to add more skill development of how to navigate the transition from the master's degree into the PhD, because we're finding that sometimes when you go into graduate school with a lot of other competitive PhD students, and now you go from an environment where there are more deaf and hard of hearing people in your area, and you go over to U of R or another top-notch research institution for a PhD, there aren't as many deaf or hard of hearing people, so you become more isolated. So, and you don't necessarily have exposure to some of the skills that these students might have. So we're going to start treating our scholars more like graduate students in real PhD programs. They're going to learn more skills about how to choosing a mentor, because there's a lot of things you need to know about picking the mentor that's the best fit for you. And try to understand the difference between exploratory research versus hypothesis-driven research. Some of us early in our careers didn't realize, how we go about writing up a research project, developing a hypothesis, and deciding how we're going to test that hypothesis. So we're going to provide more skills to help the students navigate that. We're going to give you some instruction on how to write a scientific literature review, as in a review article that could be published in a journal. So that's an important thing, because that also is what you have to go through when you write the introductory chapter of your PhD dissertation. So it's a great skill to have, because not only does it help you write your PhD dissertation, but you could get a publishable article out of it as well. So we like to get 2 things with 1 purpose. For many years, I taught grant writing at the University of Rochester, and in particular, my focus was to help graduate students get their individual pre-doctoral fellowships. They're called NRSA F31s. So obviously, Bridges scholars are not at the stage to write an F31 application in their 2nd year, but a lot of the things they need to know to write a master's thesis proposal pertain to writing a grant application. So we're going to try to blend in some of the instruction of how to go about assembling a grant application, what's important, what you need to know to develop a project, and convince somebody else who's reading it that you can do it, and why it's important to do, and that you have collected all the appropriate mentors and collaborators to make sure the project can get done. So you see up here I have this sign, specific, in parentheses, not vague aims. We want to teach you the basics of how to write specific aims for a grant, because you'd be surprised at how many grants I've read, because I've reviewed hundreds of grants. I mean, I'm not exaggerating, hundreds of grants. And people write specific games very vaguely. It's like, well, I predict something will happen. Like, what will happen? Will it go up? Will it go down? Will it be good? Will it be bad? Tell me what you're predicting. So like, really writing a specific games page for a grant is a real challenge. So it'll help you learn how to write a thesis proposal as well. So, and we're also going to add in near peer mentoring, because now we're very happy. We have, a small cluster of deaf and hard of hearing PhD students at the U of R. We have 5 in the School of Medicine and Dentistry now. And so we can have near peer mentoring for the new Bridges scholars who come in. And it'll help each other, I think, and add more of a network for all of our students. And we want to also establish a virtual network, more nationally spread online, where we can reach out to isolated individuals at other institutions where they're the only deaf or hard of hearing PhD student or postdoc or whatever. Because when we went to our most recent meeting, the ABRCMS meeting in Phoenix, Arizona, we finally, the good news was our group was not the only group represented there. We had people from University of Tennessee, Gallaudet, and the Mayo Clinic in Minnesota, the other Rochester. So it was great. We had several universities represented by people who are deaf or hard of hearing. But these individuals came to us and said, oh, we're so isolated. We need our hearing faculty to understand what we were talking about in our presentation that we gave at that meeting. And so we want to work with a national network. It's funded by NIH, where they are doing a mentoring research network, so to reach out to people who need mentors in specific disciplines or fields, to broaden the availability of the mentoring pool to many training levels. But they're not accessible to deaf and hard of hearing individuals yet, because they have a lot of videos. None of them are closed captioned. You can't trust the YouTube translation. It's just gobbledygook. So we want to work with them, and I actually approached them at the meeting in Phoenix, and they were very excited about the idea of us working together to get the ball rolling to make things more accessible. So developing this virtual network in a national community base, I think, will be a very important key to reaching out to more individuals. And I'm pretty excited about it as part of our next 5 years for the Bridges to the Doctorate program. The Bridges to the Doctorate program really works. Yesterday, Lauren Farovich, one of our Bridges scholars, who was a scholar from 2014 to 2016, passed his PhD candidacy exams, his qualifying exams. So we're all very proud of him. And he's the first Bridges scholar to complete a qualifying exam. So, we're hoping the grant gets renewed for the next 5 years, and we'll have a lot more successes to come. And we also celebrate our victories, and of course, with apple cider.